Hello, this is Tarregor. This video is a Twitch stream that was not edited, so it's gonna look like a Twitch stream. Welcome to my vision of World of Warcraft Classic Plus. The design direction of my vision of Classic Plus is substantially different from that of retail WoW, Turkish Shadowlands, and the private servers, Vanilla Plus and Turtle WoW. This is partially because it's saying it's to fix Vanilla WoW's many problems first, flesh out and polish what's already there second, and add new content third. The document displays my vision of Classic Plus, and the document's version number is 1.5.15. All versions of the document are based upon patch 1.12.2 or World of Warcraft, the one right before the Burning Crusade pre-patch. If you just want to know about the general design direction of my vision of Classic Plus before you otherwise look into this, to watch the introductory video in this playlist, or read the document yourself and look at the list of major features, the link to the document is in my channel's About page. That, and I do not have a team of people, however, working with me to make an actual private server out of this. This is all pure design thus far, and it ain't done yet. Not an honestly the actual sweeping NPC changes. Elite mobs will tentatively be changed as such. Elite mobs in general have twice as many hit points as before. Again, tentatively, I'll fine-tune that part later. Outdoor elite mobs and elite mobs in 5 main dungeons will generally hit 16 times as hard as a typical uninstanced non-elite mob of their level. 10-man elite mobs will generally hit 25 times harder than a typical uninstanced non-elite mob of their level. 10-man raid elite, 20-man raid elite, 40-man raid elite. When I wrote that part, I thought the raid part would be taken for granted, but I just thought otherwise. Anyway, yeah, I meant raid elite mobs. 20-man raid elite mobs will generally hit 33 times harder than a typical uninstanced non-elite mob of their level. 40-man raid elite mobs will generally hit 72 times harder than a typical uninstanced non-elite mob of their level. Level 1 through 10 elite mobs will receive none of these above difficulty increases. Level 11 to 15 elite mobs will only receive 20% of those difficulty increases. Mobs with a lower range will be treated by the changes if they are all of the mob's minimum level. Level 16 to 20 elite mobs will only receive 40% of the above difficulty increases. Mobs with a lower range will be treated by this changes if they are all of the mob's minimum level. Level 21 to 25 elite mobs will only receive 60% of the above difficulty increases. Mobs with a lower range will be treated by a change as if they're all of the mob's minimum level. Hold on. Okay, that's better. Level 26 to 30 elite mobs will only receive 80% of the above difficulty increases. Mobs with a level range will be treated by this change as if they are all the mob's minimum level, unless the mob's maximum level is 31 or higher, in which case they'll all be treated as level 31 plus mobs, concerning these highlighted difficulty increases. And level 31 and higher elite mobs will receive all of the above of the highlighted difficulty increases. Obviously, certain NPCs will be excluded from some amount of those buffs, such as Archmage Argol, Arcadis, and not so obviously all Walterac Valley's NPCs. The full list of such NPCs is yet to be composed. The design intention is that Clothies in 5-man dungeons generally get 3-shotted at the minimum appropriate level and the minimum expected gear, provided the dungeon is hard in Black Phantom depths, which generally means the dungeons will actually need a tank, and one that actually uses a shield, and that chain pulling generally will not happen, and that crowd control will generally get used in 5-man dungeons, and it'll also mean that the tank losing aggro in a 5-man dungeon is actually of consequence. While it is important for there to be a learning curve, it's some sort of learning curve, it is more important to kill off spell cleaving and melee cleaving, so I made it curve as hard as it does. Do know that spell cleaving doesn't really take off until, I forget off the top of my head. I think it's Scarlet Monastery Graveyard. That's when it takes off. Anyway, but in this game, it never takes off. It's impossible. Spell cleaving and melee cleaving are impossible in this game. Anyway, yeah, so I made it curve as hard as it does. Well, at least it won't be impossible in this game. I finished making changes to Scarlet Monastery in particular. That's the only place left that I gotta change for that sort of purpose. Anyway, for all, or at least most, NPCs that are not normally controlled by player characters, approximately 30% of their health, mana, and physical damage will come from strength, agility, stamina, and instant attack power, which they will, of course, have a lot of. As such, Demoralizing Shout, Screech, Scorpion Sting, Vindication, and various debuffs that reduce stats will be useful in raids. Various other debuffs that reduce stats will be useful in raids. Where's my cursor? Even when they're all used at the same time, when considering the debuff limits being increased from 16 to 255. By the way, the debuff limit is being shared with the buff limit. See section number 11.0.14, General Buff / Debuff Changes for more information. NPC bonuses from the following stats shall be as follows for all non-player characters, including even 100 Pets of Warlock Demons, except where explicitly stated otherwise. If I recall correctly, it's not stated otherwise anywhere, but just in case I do. 1 strength shall give a non-player character 2 melee attack power and 1 block value per 20 strength. 1 agility shall give a non-player character plus 2 range attack power and 1/55th of a percentage of melee and range critical strike chance at 60, and 1/55th% of a dodge chance at 60, and 2 armor. It'll give more crit chance and dodge chance at lower levels. Lower NPC levels. 1 stamina gives 10 hit points. 1 int will give 15 mana, and 1/55th of a percentage of a spell crit chance at 60. It'll give more spell crit at lower levels. I've not determined how it's going to work at lower levels yet, but it's going to be... it's actually going to be an equivalent scaling to how it works in vanilla for... Well, in comparison to players. In comparison to... I don't know how to describe it, so just forget I said that part. 1 spirit, tentatively, is going to be the same as your player character druids for non-player characters. 1 attack power will scale the same for non-player characters as for player characters, taking out the changes to Demoralizing Shout / Roar, Screech, Curse Weakness, and some other abilities. More on those in class-related videos. The eventual class-related videos. Elite mobs, raid mobs, and raid bosses will typically have an attack speed of exactly 2.5. Any other attack speed tutorial qualifies as a special mechanic for bosses for trash mobs. Because if NPCs generally did not have an attack speed of 2.5, and they attack faster, then enhanced shamans would have trouble tanking them after the changes they made to them. In fact, they probably wouldn't be able to tank them at all. And prop paladins would have trouble tanking them. And to a lesser extent, warriors would have trouble tanking them. But not so much bear druids. They do fine. Bear druids will do just fine. If they attack slower, then... Oh, that part's not even worth mentioning. Anyway, a typical level 60 non-elite, non-caster NPC... Yes, actual enhanced shaman tanks. I actually made that as a thing in this game. But more on that in the eventual shamans video. On our enhanced and talent changes. A typical level 60 non-elite, non-caster NPC is assumed to have dealt approximately 40 base damage per second without any special abilities during patch 1.12.2. Please correct me if I'm wrong. This of course would mean 100 average base damage per attack, which of course assumes a 2.5 attack speed. So level 40 elite mobs are generally going to deal 7,200 average damage per hit, raw damage. Level 20 rate, 20 man, level 40 man. I meant 40 man raid elite mobs. And no, there are not level 40 raids. I meant 40 man raids, which are all level 60 content. 20 man raid elite mobs are generally going to deal 3,300 damage per hit, and then 10 man raid elite mobs generally going to deal 2,500 damage per hit. 5 man elite mobs and outdoor elite mobs generally going to deal 1,600 damage per hit. Oh, I forgot I wrote this part. Well, I already kind of wrote this part. Raid bosses will usually hit even harder than typical 40-man raid elite mobs that are not casters. Obviously, caster mobs will hit accordingly harder than their spells according to the above, where there are 5, 10, 20, or 40-man elite mobs. Caster mobs will generally deal 25% less damage than what is mentioned above with their melee attacks and ranged weapon attacks. Pre-stat reduction NPC crit chance will be, as before, special in that it is typically equal to 5% plus 0.4% per player character's defense below the non-player character's weapon skill, and minus 0.04% per player character's defense above the NPC's weapon skill. Pre-stat reduction NPC dodge chance will, as before, be special in that it is typically equal to 5% plus 0.1% per player character's weapon skill below the non-player character's defense, and minus 0.1% per player character's weapon skill above the non-player character's defense. It shall be ensured that, as from 2004 to 2006, NPCs will ignore feared players while they're feared in favor of unfeared players, unlike in 2019's Vanilla Classic, which was of particular note in Blackwing Lair when fighting Nefarion. And next to his layer as well, if I recall correctly. Off the top of my head. All raid elite mobs will be able to see through all forms of invisibility by default, preventing you from exploiting them with the invisibility potions and the gnomish cloaking devices. All elite mobs that would not pose undue complications until you're faster will innately have 125% of normal movement speed if it would be higher than it was before, and they will all, regardless of it being faster or not, have their movement speed be increased at all times by the amount by which they are slowed, if applicable, on top of being slowed. So, for example, rank 3 Wing Clip will give them plus 60% movement speed on top of the slow, resulting in a total of 80% of normal movement speed. These movement speed boosts, while slowed, will stack multiplicatively with all other movement speed boosting effects, and they'll have the durations of all movement speed slowed and normalized effects upon them halved. Oh, I forgot, I did have them. This is part of getting rid of the spell cleave metagame for good, as well as saving off inflation by making it be less profitable for mages to farm low level dungeons. All non-player characters that are capable of moving and are not controlled by a player will be capable of running up 90 degree and even 180 degree angles in order to chase players, and will never hesitate to run up even a 180 degree angle in order to get within melee range of whoever is the highest on the aggro table, should it be the quickest path to that player or player's minion, considering both minion or hunter pet or other summoned creature, considering both vertical and horizontal distance. This does not mean that non-player characters will run upon thin air to reach a player. It means they'll run up walls and potentially even on ceilings in order to reach the player. This is part of getting rid of the spell cleave metagame for good, as well as saving off inflation by making it be far less profitable for mages to farm low level dungeons by limiting the levels of dungeons that they can farm. This particular change is admittedly bad game design, but the alternative is sterilizing the game's level design, which would cost months or even years worth of level design work to do, and would not otherwise be much better, if at all, than making them run up walls and ceilings. All uninstanced raid elite mods, which had used to be elite mods in patch 1.1.0, and Descendants are outside of Mardon, will be elite mobs once again, and all relevant quests will be changed accordingly. The distance that a non-player character must be from a player in order to begin invading will only consider the NPC's horizontal distance from the player in order to prevent exploits. The vertical distance between the NPC and the player, how much higher or lower the NPC is than you, will not be considered. When a non-player character has been in combat for 30 consecutive minutes or more, the NPC will evade bug back to where it was aggroed from, in order to prevent things such as having wind color Calgon be kited to a hidden spawn on the other side of the continent at 4 AM and then sheeped here by imagine. Yes, people take turns playing this down 24/7 to keep it sheeped until the server does a weekly reset. Which, if I recall correctly, has happened before, something like that at least. Certain NPCs, such as Tarregor and Omen, will be accepted to this change. When I say has happened before, I meant in Vanilla Classic, not actual Vanilla. Like 2019 and later. NPCs will never respawn their pickpocketing loot tails until the NPCs themselves respawn, if at all. All world bosses and your trash mods will be designed around being fought with 20 players rather than with 40 players. With how hard I'm making 20-man raid boss hit, they'll still be plenty hard to beat, given that other players can disrupt your attempts to kill the boss, even on PvE servers. This is being done in part because their loot is not quite as good as 40-man raid loot. Now, why did I write that? I don't even remember why I wrote this part. I'm just going to leave that part. Yeah, this is being done in part because their loot isn't quite as good as 40-man raid loot. Anyway, it's 40-man raid loot is all item level 65 stuff in this game. And then world boss loot is all item level 63. All 40-man raid loot is epic, so it's all world boss loot. And that excludes the few legendary items that you can get from 40-man raids, which are not world bosses. Whenever an NPC uses a mechanic that pulls the entire room or what have you, he'll use that mechanic again every 10 seconds until he dies or de-aggros, which will prevent various exploits. All Dark Iron Dwarves, demonic cats that are not Fel Hunters, enemies with Flame Waker models, enemies with Earth/Lava Elemental models, enemies with Molten Giant models in coloration, enemies with Corehound models, and golems, and humanoid members of the Twilight Hammer cult will not be allowed to have more base fire resistance than it takes for them to resist more than half of the average fire damage dealt to them by hit cast enemies at their level, so 210 for the level 60, 210 fire resistance for the level 63 mobs. And all Dragonkin will not be allowed to have enough base resistance to any school of magic for them to resist more than half of the average damage of the relevant type dealt to them by hit cast enemies at their level, so 210 for level 63 mobs. This is being done so that, in conjunction with other changes in other sections of this document, Fire Mage and Industrial Warlocks will do fine in Blackrock Mountain, and so that Elemental Mages enhance the chances to do fine in the Emerald Dream and versus the Nightmare Dragons. Excuse me, Emerald Nightmare. I forgot that part. And the Nightmare Dragons. And it also affects other mobs for the sake of consistency. All Warlock NPCs that know Shadow Bolt will know Fell Bolt instead, which is just reskinned Shadow Bolt. And their Shadow Bolt voice will be similarly reskinned. Fell Bolt is going to have a green graphic, Shadow Bolt and a purple graphic. Part of what I'm doing to this game is making the lore be more consistent. All Warlock entities that know Death Coil will know a spell called Goldon's Wrath instead, which is just reskinned Death Coil. Warlocks are not necromancers, so they do not have death magic. Goldon's Wrath is spell magic, though that has the exact same function as Death Coil in vanilla. All Death Knight and Necromancer NPCs that know Shadow Bolt will know Death Coil instead, which will simply deal shadow damage to non-undead creatures or heal undead creatures. Counting the Forsaken as not undead, that is, Forsaken player characters are not undead. That's what I meant. And their Shadow Bolt voids will be changed accordingly. Necromancers do not have void magic. They are not priests. All remaining NPCs that need Shadow Bolt and Shadow Bolt volley will know Void Bolt and Void Bolt volley instead. Because that stuff, because a spell like that just conjures pure shadow or however and just throws it, would have to be void. It would thematically have to be void magic in order for it to work thematically. The NPC, the non-player character spell, Veil of Shadow, will be renamed to Veil of Death, specifying its being death magic. The non-player character, yes, I know there's some NPCs that are not necromancers or death knights know that spell, but I did capture as NPCs and are changing just to specific NPCs. In the next video. The NPC spell Hex will be renamed to Anoran Hex, whose name does not have the issue of being generic in comparison to the hexes. Anoran means frog-like in real life. All Hydras will be reclassified as beasts. They'll still be untamable, however. All shamanistic verbal non-player characters that are not in the Timberwall tribe are too thematically corrupted by fell energies of these shamans, seeing as how, quotation mark, dark shamans, quotation mark, were retconned out of existence. As such, all those NPCs will be turned into Geomancers, which are completely different, and their abilities will be changed accordingly. Zion knows this will get rid of the thematically conflicting move player totems made by Winterfall Totemics. Allow me to take the time to fetch the definition of Geomancers from my from the tabletop game I'm making, which can be turned into an RTS if after I finish it. Okay, Geomancer. I forgot the end. And I hit the wrong button. Geomancer seeks in favor of the elemental lords in order to be granted power, typically by doing things such as performing dances, rituals, and sacrifices for them. Compared to shamans, Geomancers do not practice nature spirit magic, they are not capable of melee combatants, and they are generally more offensive and far less defensive than the shamans are. In stark contrast to shamans, Geomancers do not care about elemental harmony as long as they receive the power that they pursue, and they have no connection to their ancestors beyond those of commoners, nor do they care to. The first of the Geomancers worship Theriz and its stone mother exclusively, hence the name of Geomancer. Eventually, Geomancers discovered that they could also worship the other elements of the lords and derive power from them as well, or even instead, much to Theriz and its stone mother's disdain. The Xynos, the Draenors, the elemental theories do not support Geomancy's deal, they support shamanism. On a related note, the Lost Ones discovered Geomancy and traveled to Azeroth. The Xynos advanced to decide if spellcasters can have spells under source of power is on another planet, or spellcasters of Draenor get their power from under near Azeroth, get their power from the Dark Portal and Narrow Portal. However, this part only concerns this tabletop game and make it that can eventually be turned into an RTS because I'm designing it that way, and there's not going to be an Outland in this WoW Classic Plus. That tabletop game making it intended to be a sequel to this game, eventually. Alright, and that's all I got for Sweet NPC changes. Thanks for watching.